Look at this image. Nothing about it looks unusual. No logo, no corner tag, no little sparkle icon. But it's signed. Not signed like a signature in the corner, signed in the pixels themselves, in the brightness values, in a pattern you physically cannot see that survives cropping, filtering, screenshotting, and recompressing. Google alone says it has stamped over 100 billion images and videos this way, plus 60,000 years of audio. And on August 2nd, marking AI content stopped being a nice corporate gesture and became the law on 2 continents at the same time. So in this video, what these watermarks actually are, how each type works, who's using them, who they help, who they hurt, whether they can be removed, and the honest answer to the question everybody's typing into Google at 2 in the morning. Let's go. Here's the first thing almost everyone gets wrong. AI watermark isn't one thing. There are 3 completely different technologies, and they fail in completely different ways. Layer 1, metadata. This is a signed label attached to the file, like a nutrition label on a bottle. The standard is called C2PA, the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, and when you see it in the wild, it's usually branded Content Credentials. It records what made this, when, what tool edited it, and whether the chain has been broken since. It's cryptographically signed, so you can't forge it. But, and this is the whole story, it lives outside the picture. Screenshot the image, and it's gone. Upload it somewhere that recompresses files and it can be gone. It's a tag on a string, and the string cuts easily. Layer 2, the invisible watermark. This one is inside the content. The model nudges the actual data, the pixel values, the audio waveform, the word choices, in a pattern that a matching detector can find later and that a human can't perceive at all. Cut the string on the tag, this one's still there. That's the point. Layer 3, fingerprinting. No marking at all. The company just keeps a searchable index of everything its model ever produced and checks whether your file matches something in it. OpenAI says it runs internal reverse image and audio search that traces videos back to Sora with high accuracy. You can't strip a fingerprint out of a file. It was never in the file. It's in their database. Metadata. Easy to read, easy to lose. Watermark. Hard to see, hard to remove, hard for you to check. Fingerprint. Impossible to remove, and completely out of your hands. Most serious systems now stack all 3. Okay, under the hood. This is the part that makes the rest of the video make sense, so stay with me. I'll keep it clean. Images and video first. The watermark isn't drawn on top of the picture. It's baked in while the picture is being generated. The model shifts pixel values by amounts smaller than your eye can resolve, arranged in a pattern that carries a signal. Because it's woven through the entire image rather than sitting in one corner, you can crop it, apply a filter, change the frame rate, save it as a lossy JPEG, and enough of the pattern usually survives for a detector to still find it. For video, that's applied frame by frame, so cutting the clip down doesn't kill it. Audio next. Audio is my favorite one, honestly. The system converts the sound into a spectrogram, a visual picture of the frequencies over time, embeds the watermark into that, and then converts it back into sound. The waveform now carries a mark that survives MP3 compression, added background noise, and speed changes. And you cannot hear it. Google applies this to its music and podcast generation models. And then text. Text is the hardest, and the most elegant. A language model generates one token at a time, and at every step it has a ranked list of plausible next words. A text watermark quietly biases that choice, nudging the model toward a specific subset of green words, in a pattern seeded by a secret key. Read the paragraph and it's completely normal. Run the detector and the distribution of word choices is statistically wrong in exactly the right way. The catch? It needs length. A tweet has almost no signal. And if you paraphrase heavily or run it through another model, the pattern dilutes fast. This is why text watermarking is the weakest link in the whole system, which matters enormously for the conversation about whether a student used AI. We'll come back to it. Now, who's marking what? As of August 2026, Google is the most aggressive by a distance. Their system is called Cynked from DeepMind. It runs across all four modalities: image, video, audio, and text, applied to output from their Gemini image and video models, their music generation, and their podcast generation. Over 100 billion images and videos. They're also attaching C2PA content credentials on top, across Gemini, Vertex AI, and Google Ads. And here's the development that I think most people missed, and it's the biggest one in this whole space. On May 19th this year, SynthID stopped being a Google thing. Google announced that OpenAI, NVIDIA, 11 Labs, and Kakao are adopting SynthID watermarking in their own products, with Apple named among the partners working on interoperable tools. OpenAI is embedding it in images from ChatGPT, Codex, and the API, and as of a July update, in audio too. Think about what that means. The two companies that spent 3 years being described as mortal enemies just agreed to use the same invisible signature. That's not a partnership announcement, that's a standard being born. OpenAI is also now C2PA conformant across DALL-E, Sora, ChatGPT, Codex, and Voice Engine, and previewed a public tool that lets anyone check whether an image came out of ChatGPT. Sora specifically ships with a visible moving watermark, plus C2PA metadata, plus internal reverse search fingerprinting. 3 layers, 1 file. Adobe effectively started this whole movement. Content Credentials is their baby, Firefly Output carries it, and they run a free public inspector for any file. Meta applies AI info labels across its platforms and reads provenance signals from other companies' files to auto-label uploads. And on the hardware side, the Pixel 10 became the first phone with Content Credentials built natively into the camera app. And now the hole in the boat: open-weight models. Anyone can download an image model, run it on their own machine, and generate as much unmarked content as they like. No watermark, no metadata, no fingerprint in anyone's database. So understand what this system actually is. It marks content from the big, cooperative, commercial providers. It does approximately nothing against a determined bad actor with a graphics card. Which raises the obvious question: if it doesn't stop the worst people, why is the entire world mandating it? And the answer is, it was never designed to stop them. It's designed to make the default content that 99% of people encounter traceable. It's a public health measure, not a lock. Here's the part almost no creator has caught up on. On August 2nd, 2026, 2 things happened on 2 continents on the same day. In the European Union, Article 50 of the AI Act came into force. Providers of generative AI must ensure output is marked in a machine-readable format and detectable as artificially generated. Deployers must disclose deepfakes and AI-generated text published on matters of public interest. Non-compliance runs to €15 million or 3% of worldwide annual turnover, whichever is higher. And note, the obligation lands on providers and deployers. Using someone else's tool does not move the duty off you. One nuance worth getting right, because a lot of coverage has butchered it. Generative systems already on the market before August 2nd get until December 2nd, 2026, but only for the machine-readable marking duty specifically. The rest of Article 50 applied immediately. And content generated before August 2nd doesn't have to be retroactively labeled. And note the direction of travel. Google signed the European Union's Transparency Code of Practice in July. The big providers aren't fighting this one. They're racing to be the standard. In California, the AI Transparency Act became operative the same day. Any generative AI provider with over 1 million monthly users has to offer a free public AI detection tool, embed latent disclosures in image, video, and audio output, and make visible labeling available. And it escalates. From January 2027, large online platforms, anything over 2 million monthly users, have to detect provenance data in what people upload and show users what it says. From January 2028, camera and phone manufacturers have to be able to embed provenance at the point of capture. And China got there first. Their labeling measures took effect in September 2025, requiring both explicit labels, visible to users, and implicit labels embedded in file metadata. 3 of the largest regulatory blocks on Earth, all converging on the same answer, within 12 months. This is not a trend, this is infrastructure. Let's get specific about who feels this, because it isn't abstract. If you're a YouTuber, this one's immediate. On May 27th, 2026, YouTube moved AI disclosure labels out of the description and put them directly under the player on long form, and as an overlay on shorts. And they started applying labels automatically. In their words, if a creator doesn't specify whether or not they used AI, but our systems detect significant photorealistic AI use, we will now automatically apply a label. You don't get to opt out of that. And if the content came from Google's own video tools or arrived carrying C2PA metadata saying it's fully generative, the disclosure is permanent. You can't remove it. The good news, and I want to be precise here, because there's a lot of panic about this, YouTube explicitly states that a disclosure label alone does not change how a video is recommended or whether it can earn money. The thing that actually demonetizes channels is the separate policy on mass-produced, repetitive, inauthentic content. That's a quality and effort judgment, not a watermark judgment. Don't conflate the two. The label isn't the punishment. If you're a journalist or photographer, this flips into an asset. YouTube now supports a disclosure that marks footage as captured with a camera, driven by C2PA-capable hardware. Proving your footage came out of a real lens, unedited, is becoming a credential you can actually display. If you're a student or academic, text watermarking is the weakest modality, detectors are unreliable, and being falsely accused is a real risk. Provenance on your drafting process is worth more than any detector's verdict. If you're a business, the compliance duty applies to you as a deployer. Your marketing agency's AI images are your legal problem in the European Union. And if you're just a person, this is the layer between you and a voice clone of your kid asking you to wire money. That's the actual point of all this. Here's the strategic insight, and if you take one thing from this video, take this. Everyone is obsessed with detecting AI. That's the losing game. Detection is a permanent arms race, and detectors will always be a step behind. The winning game is the inverse, proving something is real. You cannot cryptographically prove an image wasn't made by AI, but you absolutely can cryptographically prove that this image came out of this camera at this time and hasn't been altered since. That's not an arms race. That's just signatures. And we solved signatures decades ago. So the durable move, for journalists, for brands, for anyone whose credibility is the product, isn't buying a better detector. It's building a provenance trail on your own work. Shoot with capable hardware. Keep credentials attached through your edit. Publish with them intact. In a world where anything can be faked, the scarce thing isn't the ability to spot fakes. It's a receipt. Now, let me be equally honest about the failures, because this system has real ones. 1. The string cuts too easily. Metadata is fragile by design. A screenshot destroys it. Many platforms re-encode uploads and strip it. Most of the provenance data generated in the world is lost by accident, not by malice. 2. Absence proves nothing. No credential on a file does not mean it's fake, and it does not mean it's real. It usually just means it passed through something that didn't preserve them. YouTube says this explicitly about its camera disclosure. But the public will absolutely read no label as a verdict. And that's a misinformation vector all by itself. 3. The checking tools are still fragmented, though this is the one that's improving fastest. Historically, Google's detector found Google's watermark and nothing else. That's changing. Verification is in the Gemini app, used 50 million times globally. It's rolling into Search and Chrome. OpenAI has its own public checker, and there's now a detection API on Google Cloud aimed at organizations. But there is still no single universal button that tells you whether something is AI. The specialist detection portal is gated behind a waitlist for journalists and media professionals, and none of it touches content from a model someone ran on their own machine. 4. False positives. Automated visual detection is a classifier making a probabilistic guess. It will sometimes mislabel real footage. YouTube offers a dispute path in Studio. Know where that button is before you need it. 5. The liar's dividend. The more the public knows content can be faked, the easier it becomes for someone caught on camera to say that's AI. Genuine evidence gets deniable. That's the cost of this whole conversation, and provenance infrastructure is the only real answer to it. Right. The question everyone actually came here for. Let me answer it properly, and let me tell you up front, I'm not going to give you a step-by-step, And by the end of this section, I think you'll agree I'm doing you a favor. Technically, is it possible? Partly, and it depends which layer. Metadata is trivially fragile. That's not a hack. That's just what happens when you screenshot something. Invisible pixel watermarks are genuinely vulnerable, and this is established academic fact, not a rumor. There's a well-known result, peer-reviewed, presented at Newer IPS, showing what's called a regeneration attack. Push the image into a latent space, add noise, reconstruct it with a generative model. The authors proved that any watermark constrained to small pixel-level changes can be removed this way, including, in their words, watermarks that haven't been invented yet. They removed 98% of one commercial scheme while keeping image quality high. Text watermarks dilute under heavy paraphrasing. So yes, the theory is public, and there's an entire cottage industry of removal tools selling against it. Here's why it doesn't get you what you think it gets you. It doesn't beat platform-side detection. YouTube's automatic labeling isn't only reading your file's metadata, it's also looking at the pixels and judging whether the content is photorealistic AI. Stripping a tag doesn't change what the picture looks like to a classifier. It doesn't beat fingerprinting. If the provider kept a searchable index of its own output, there is nothing in your file to remove. Attacks degrade the thing you're protecting. Regeneration attacks regenerate the image. You are, definitionally, damaging your own asset. Research is moving to semantic watermarks. The same paper that broke pixel-level marks points at the successor, watermarks embedded in the structure of what's depicted rather than in pixel values. You can't nudge those away without changing the image into a different image. And the legal exposure just got real. As of August 2nd, in the European Union, the duty to mark and disclose sits on providers and deployers, with fines up to 15 million euros or 3% of global turnover. California's regime is live. Stripping provenance to pass AI content off as authentic isn't an edgy growth hack anymore. Depending on what you're doing with it, it can be fraud, impersonation, or an election law problem. So the legitimate version of this question, and it's a good question, is the opposite one. My credentials got stripped by accident. How do I get them back? And the answer is that you re-sign the file with a content credentials tool at export. Don't strip provenance. Restore it. That's the workflow that actually pays in 2027. Quick projections, so you're early instead of late. Provenance moves into the places you already look. Verification is already landing in Search and Chrome, with photos and YouTube signposted. When checking an image is a right-click instead of a trip to a website, adoption goes vertical. Hardware becomes the root of trust. The Pixel 10 already signs photos in the camera app. California mandates capture device provenance by 2028. Expect signing at the sensor to become a phone spec. People compare, like megapixels. A market for certified human content. Once machine content is universally marked, verified human work becomes a premium category with a price attached. Watch for the first platform that charges for that badge. Agent output. Nobody has solved what a provenance chain looks like when an autonomous agent generated, edited, and published something with no human in the loop. That's the 2027 fight, and the text problem stays unsolved. Expect schools and publishers to give up on detection and move to process provenance, version history, drafting trails, instead. So, the invisible signature is real. It's in over 100 billion files. The biggest rivals in the industry just agreed to use the same one. It's now legally required in the world's two largest regulatory blocks. It is genuinely fragile. And the smart play isn't fighting it. The smart play is being the person who can prove what's real, while everyone else is still arguing about what's fake. 3 things to do today. 1. Check your last 3 uploads in YouTube Studio for auto-applied AI labels. 2. Run one of your own published images through a content credentials inspector, see what survived. 3. If you publish anything in or into the European Union, find out whether you're a deployer. You probably are. If this was useful, subscribe. This channel is where we get to the actual mechanism instead of the headline. And tell me in the comments, should proving you're human be free? Or is that going to end up a paid feature? I think we already know. This is Cynked. See you in the next one.